Just before we move on to the next item, how many councillors are going to the Battle of the Somme commemoration?
I would like to.
You'd like to, and Vicky would like to as well. Now, is it 11 o'clock? So we don't have to leave here for another 20 minutes? Yeah, okay. So it's just over there. So well, let's power on to the rates remission consideration for South Awatea. This was a request from a report from Strategy and Finance. We asked that this come to council with a report on the South Awatea. Slightly different decision from the one that we made. I mean, different issue from the one we made last week, but an equally challenging decision. Raf, do you want to move the staff recommendation, or do you have a different view? No. What would you like to move?
I want to move the option 2.
Option 2. Can we go to option 2 and see if we can turn that into a resolution?
Is it possible just to ask a question of staff in the meantime?
Yes, you can ask us a question of staff in the meantime.
Yeah, thank you. I just wondered whether there's a way in which we can actually see where there's been massive changes of value. So is there a kind of systemic approach we could actually take to looking at where this has happened rather than just rely on individuals to make deputations?
Upwards and downwards, or just downwards?
It's probably upwards. It seems that's the one that's been the concern expressed by people, that their land's been, rezoned for development, and they've got these huge increases when development is unlikely to happen because of whatever reason.
And presumably that would also have to take into account whether they had sold close to the time or not, with evaluation as a point of fact.
So we can do that?
You'd have to cross-reference it to land ownership and sale as well.
I'm just trying to understand whether we're just going to get a whole bunch of ad hoc requests to give people rates of remission because their land's been rezoned, it's now worth a lot more, and the rates have gone up hugely, or whether there's a more strategic way in which we can address this.
That's not the basis for the request. So I think it would be wrong to make that assumption. There are other ways of dealing with property values. This is a property revaluation that's based on something that was due to happen that hasn't happened. So and that's very similar to the last decision we made. It's not exactly the same. Paul?
Just actually picking up on Peter's point, I would be interested to know if anyone in this area has picked up the value since the rating value has gone up, on-sold it, and now they're in there wanting a rates remission.
No, I don't think there's been any sales in the South Awatea area. And just, sorry, to answer the original question, yes, every time we do a revaluation, we do a little heat map and charts of different areas to show how values have changed up and down and what the impacts of that are on rates. But the Mayor's quite right. Obviously, the situation here is that the values in 2013 are considered to fairly reflect what the actual value was at the time. And what has happened subsequent to that is that the signalled rezoning to enable that development and the realisation of that sort of value has just not happened. And there's a question mark over whether it will happen or not, depending on what happens to the Kart Club. So this is the sort of thing that is fairly routine, I guess, around the town, and the district planning changes are signalled and changes do happen. I think what's happened in these two cases we've had recently is that because the district plan change has happened far more quickly than is normally the case, these issues, and it just happened to straddle a 2013 revaluation as well, these issues have been highlighted in a couple of areas where the changes have been quite significant.
So, I mean, the other question I have was related to where we've seen a huge rezoning of density, whether that's now going to put the property values up.
Can we just please deal with this report? I'm seriously, we just talked about all wanting to go to this commemoration. Vicky?
Option 2 creates quite a high threshold in terms of the 50% increase. Yep. Are you reasonably comfortable with that as threshold?
It's a little arbitrary, I've got to say, and it doesn't matter what threshold we choose, there's going to be boundary issues. I mean, the table
Yes.
on page 243.
Yes, shows one at 48%.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So, you know, we could choose 45%, but there'll be someone at 44. Any decision like this is bound to have boundary issues, so it becomes a matter of relatively arbitrary judgment to decide how big a rates increase is big enough that it warrants
But in
special
terms of the potential flow-on effect, which was one of the concerns of the earlier decision, and obviously one here, if it's a 50% one, the potential for flow-on is reasonably limited?
Yeah, I did estimates here earlier on. I think there were about 1,000 properties that experienced a 50% rates increase after the reval last time round. Obviously only a relatively small number of those will be in a similar position to this. The vast bulk of those 1,000 will have very likely retained that increase in value.
And people can always object to the evaluation at the time of the valuation.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, and again, that's the same point. There's no question that these were wrong at the time. The
Yeah.
issue at hand is...
The trouble is that they thought that the
Yeah.
value was going
Yes.
to increase because
Yes.
the cart club was going to go earlier as well.
It's a happenstance.
Yeah.
I'm happy to move.
You already have, I thought. No. Well, no, Raf's already moved it and you can second it.
Jimmy can
So-
cite it the...
So this is the word, provide a 25% rates remission. Now, Ali, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to ask that 1,000 properties then.
That's essentially what the precedent created could be, is that right? Or is there a greater potential numbers-wise, citywide precedent-wise?
That's a good question. That's just a bald number of the number of properties where rates increased by 50% at the last reval.
Citywide?
So, citywide.
Really close.
Okay, thanks.
Right. Okay, I will, it's been moved and seconded. Did you have a question?
No, not question.
Following Vicky's question, I mean, looking at that there is that 48% one, which is an outlier, and there's below that I think it's 22%. So could we include that property?
That property.
Yeah, because that's just an outlier.
There's a 48, a 44 and a 40.
Is there- Well, I can only see if in the table I'm looking at, it's only got the 48% one.
The last two, 410 and 440 Wigram Road, are at 44 and 40.
Okay.
So you're looking
I'm looking at the land
Hawthorne
value change.
Junction Road.
Okay.
So if we go to 50%, there's
Which number?
Yeah.
He's looking at the wrong column.
3 of these.
Sorry, what was that?
If we go to 50%, there's 3 of these.
Yes.
4.
Oh, sorry, 4, quite right.
4 over 50?
Yeah.
So are we talking about the land value
So
change?
it's
or the
providing a
rates
rate,
value change?
25% rates remission for properties which experience a 50%
Yeah, I was looking at the
increase.
land value change rather than the rates change.
Are you s-
Both land values and rates. So where's the fourth one? Are you
First one is Horsewell Junction Road 340, number 340.
Oh, in both land
And also
values.
300 over Junction Road, 314 in
Sorry, I'll just ask Steve to clarify it, shall I?
They're
Yeah, okay,
highlighted,
sorry.
the highlighting doesn't make sense.
No, I'll just get Steve to clarify which ones he's talking about.
Yeah, sorry, the highlights on the left-hand side, the properties, that was, I should have deleted that before I published it. I'm sorry, that's just to indicate to me that where there's common ownership.
I see.
What really matters is the rates figure. The land values are useful background because they tell you how things moved generally, but rates are obviously calculated on total capital value, not just land value. So improvements make a difference.
Plus rates must have gone up 50%, there's 4 in that.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
that column on the right.
Okay, yep. All right, so, okay, I'll put that motion. Yeah, and then Jimmy.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think this is important. I don't think it sets a precedent, other than we've really got to be careful around rezonings where there isn't price discovery. So where we've revalued on the basis of a potential rezoning. I think, so when it comes to new valuations, I think we need to think about this, that we need some kind of market price information to actually show that the value of those properties have gone up. And I think it's better to wait to see that rather than predict, just because there's been a rezoning, that the price has now doubled. So I think that's the important thing here, and so it's not going to affect a lot of properties. It's going to be quite specific around these types of rezonings.
Yeah. Just for clarification, though, when we do, as you know, when we do these revaluations, we must have a market value as at 1
Yep,
August.
we're having a debate now,
Yeah,
not a question.
I'm talking
sorry.
about actually price discovery in the market as opposed to
Oh.
evaluation, yeah.
Okay.
So I think this is quite appropriate.
Yanni, what, do you want to debate?
Yeah, we're in debate.
Okay, Jimmy?
Yes, thank you, yeah. Because my personal view, staff teacher review report is comprehensive report, it's very good. Especially option 2, why I would like to, support option 2. Particularly, you specify in here, option 2, advantage, acknowledge significant change of circumstances since the 2013 due to the factors outside affected ratepayer control. That's a factor, which means council rezone Awatea to the living G with a constraint on South Awatea to develop cannot go ahead until a car club has ceased operating. But you also, based on the page 242, the 5.4, bullet point 3, you also recognize this resource concern is kind of high risk resource concern. Maybe we're not to be obtained because while they have a strong opposition, then eventually maybe council will consider formal change to rezone back to the rural. So that's high risk. So this has to be the mitigate this situation. So that's why I don't want to support option 1. I prefer the option 2. And also 22 properties, only the 4 is over the land value and the property over 50%. That's reasonable. We specify those one, not everything, just part of it. So that's would like to support option 2.
Yanni?
Happy to support the resolution that's been moved, although I do think this raises a huge question with how we're actually doing evaluations and revaluing something. I mean, rezoning land that can't be developed is silly. We should actually be not rezoning land until it can be developed, in my view, because if you take this area in particular, we've now got advice that there's a high risk the resource consent won't be obtained at all from the Kart Club. And we've spent, I don't know how many hours and how many millions trying to sort this issue out. So I think it's unfortunate. And, I have to say, I worry about other areas of the city that have now got higher density zoning and what's going to happen in terms of their land value and their rates value, and what compensation will they be able to apply for if we have a similar situation because we don't have infrastructure in place or whatever it is. So, but I think it's good option 1 in that it does set a pretty high bar by requiring both the land value and the rates to be at a certain threshold. So I will support it, but it would be good to get something back at some stage around how the valuation and the land use planning connects to each other in regards to this issue, so that we don't get a whole bunch of people coming back after the fact, but rather at the time when the valuations come out, there is a process by which they can understand and possibly challenge if they can't develop as they thought they could.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. That's carried.